At the neighbor's anniversary party, she showed up in that very dress, until I made a move that left the guests speechless. Phil and Denise's backyard was glowing with lanterns strung between trees, casting golden light over white folding chairs and overly ambitious hors d'oeuvres. It was the kind of suburban gathering that had just enough Pinterest inspiration to impress but not enough to int asterisk mid-8. I had just gotten off work, still in my button-down and dress shoes, so I wasn't exactly dressed for mingling. But I figured it'd be an easy night. Show up, eat some shrimp cocktail, raise a glass to the happy couple, and be back home in time to catch the last quarter of the game. I wasn't expecting fireworks. Certainly not the kind that lit up inside my chest the moment Martha walked through the garden gate. You ever feel that split-second shift in energy? Like the kind where everyone's head turns just slightly, not enough to be obvious, but enough to register that something or someone just interrupted the rhythm of the room? That's what happened. Conversations didn't stop entirely, but they faltered. Laughter dipped, wine glasses paused midair, and people, especially the men, looked up, toward her. Martha was wearing a deep emerald green dress I had never seen before. Silk, I think. It hugged her figure in a way that demanded attention, with a backless cut and a slit that showed more leg than I was used to seeing her reveal publicly. It looked expensive, deliberate, the kind of thing you'd wear to a gala, not a neighborhood anniversary barbecue. I blinked, unsure whether to feel flattered, confused, or both. She was my wife, after all, and she looked breathtaking. But that wasn't the word I landed on in the moment. The word that quietly nestled itself into my gut was calculated. "Martha," I asked as she approached, lifting a hand like I had to verify it was really her. She smiled, cool, polished, camera-ready. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, pressing a kiss to my cheek. Her perfume hit me first, stronger than usual, sharper, like she'd reapplied it recently. She handed me a glass of rose. "You made it just in time for Denise's speech." "Nice dress," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. Her eyes sparkled in a way that felt off. "Thanks. Got it on clearance last minute." I nearly asked where, but something about the way she answered told me not to push. And that's when I saw it. A smudge, right below her jawline, near the curve of her neck. Faint, but unmistakable. A soft maroon smear. It wasn't her lipstick. Martha hadn't worn that color since maybe our 3rd anniversary, when she went through a short-lived bold lip phase. These days it was all neutrals, peachy beiges, classy, understated. This was glossy, loud, and not hers. I froze. My fingers tightened slightly around the stem of the glass. She noticed, of course she noticed, and without missing a beat, she let out a little laugh, swept her hair across her shoulder to cover the spot, and turned toward the growing crowd. "Oh my God. Did you see what Denise did to the patio? Phil finally let her tear out that old fire pit. It looks incredible." Just like that, she moved on, redirected, like a magician drawing attention to one hand while hiding the card in the other. But I wasn't watching the patio. I was watching her. She leaned into conversations, touched arms, tilted her head when she laughed in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not since before we were married. It wasn't that she was being inappropriate, not exactly, but she was switched on in a way that didn't match the event. Or the company. And people noticed. Not directly, but in glances, side eyes. I caught Denise's sister whispering something to her husband after Martha walked away. Even Phil looked puzzled when Martha complimented his tie like she'd never met him before. Phil, who'd helped us move into the neighborhood 6 years ago, who lent me his hedge trimmer every other month. Martha brushed it all off like it was nothing. She smiled. She laughed. She flowed through the room like a guest of honor at someone else's celebration. But I couldn't unsee the lipstick. That single, small trace stuck in my head like a song lyric I couldn't stop humming. Everything else faded. The clink of champagne flutes, the speeches, the slideshow of Phil and Denise's wedding photos. All background noise. I couldn't stop wondering. Who had left that mark? An hour into the party, I pulled Martha aside near the buffet table. "Can I talk to you for a second?" She looked up, still smiling. Of course. I gestured toward the side gate, and we stepped out into the dim alley between the house and the garden fence. It was quieter there, far from the crowd. "What's going on?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, searching for the right words, soft enough not to sound accusatory, but firm enough to get her attention. "The dress, the makeup, the energy. You don't usually go all out like this." Her smile faltered for just a moment. A flicker, like a power outage that lasts half a second before the lights flicker back on. "It's a party, isn't it?" she said, stepping closer, resting a hand on my chest. I wanted to look nice. "Is that a problem?" "No, it's just—" I gestured vaguely toward her neck. "You've got something right there." She touched her throat reflexively. "Where?" I pointed. "Just under your jawline." She glanced down at her phone, using the front camera as a mirror. Her expression didn't change when she saw it. She gave a soft laugh. "Must have been from one of Denise's hugs. She wears that dark berry lipstick, remember?" I nodded slowly, but I didn't believe her. Martha and Denise had hugged, yes, but not that close. And even if they had, how would her lipstick have ended up under Martha's jaw, not on her cheek? It didn't add up. None of it did. She kissed me again on the mouth this time. Light, clean, deceptive. "You're overthinking things," she said, her voice warm, practiced. "Relax. Have a drink. Enjoy the night." And then she turned, walking back toward the garden lights and laughter. I stood there a minute longer, alone in the shadows, holding a half-finished glass of wine and a feeling I couldn't name yet. It wasn't quite anger. Not yet. It was a deep, dull thud behind my ribs. A sense of distance I hadn't known existed between us until that very moment. I walked back into the party, talked, smiled, laughed when someone made a joke about HOA fees. But something had shifted. The world tilted by a single silent degree. That lipstick. It was a detail no one else would remember. But I would. After the party, things didn't return to normal. Not really. On the surface, sure, we went back to our routines, workdays and coffee runs, small talk about the weather and groceries. But underneath it all, something had shifted. And I couldn't stop thinking about that night. That lipstick. That look in her eye. I told myself not to dwell. Told myself I was probably overthinking things, letting paranoia get the better of me. But the mind doesn't listen when the gut keeps whispering. Something's off. Something's wrong. The first thing I noticed was her phone. Martha used to leave it on the kitchen counter, screen up, never locked. She'd get texts from her sister, memes from coworkers, recipe links she'd forget to open. It was just another appliance in the house, like the toaster or the thermostat, part of the landscape. But the week after the party, the phone became sacred. Always on her, always screen down, and suddenly it had a passcode. A new one. The first time I saw her typing it in, I didn't say anything. Just watched from the hallway, my chest tightening as her fingers moved quickly, reflexively. It wasn't a big deal, right? Everyone locks their phones. Maybe it was for work security. Maybe. Then came the late nights. She started coming to bed later and later, slipping under the covers after I was already half asleep. At first, I chalked it up to overtime. She's in marketing and deadlines get crazy. But one night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and found the other side of the bed still cold. I wandered downstairs and saw the back porch light on. Martha was outside, pacing barefoot across the deck, phone pressed to her ear. She was whispering, smiling, laughing, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. I didn't interrupt, just stood behind the curtain, watching her through the glass like a stranger. After a while, she hung up, stared at the sky for a moment, then came back inside. I had already gone back to bed, pretending to be asleep when she slipped beneath the covers. She didn't say a word. Then came the business trips. Martha had always traveled occasionally, conferences, client pitches, regional retreats, but they were rare and usually planned well in advance. Now they were popping up out of nowhere. "I have to fly to Austin for a quick meeting," she said one morning while pouring coffee. "Just overnight." I nodded, even smiled. Do you want me to drop you off at the airport? She hesitated. No, I'm getting a ride with a coworker. Save you the drive. The red flags were stacking up like bricks, but I still wasn't ready to call it what it was. Not yet, but curiosity has a way of eroding doubt. I started checking small things, not in a frantic, obsessed way, just a verifying. I logged into our shared calendar. The trip to Austin? Not listed. I checked her company's site. No event. No conference. Nothing. I wanted to confront her, but I didn't. I needed more than instinct. I needed proof. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in the pocket of a blazer she had worn the night before. It was from a restaurant downtown. Not the kind you go to for a team dinner. Int asterisk mate. Expensive. The kind with candlelight and wine pairings. The bill showed 2 entrees, 2 glasses of Malbec, and a dessert. Tiramisu, her favorite. I flipped the paper over in my hands, heart thudding in my chest. She hadn't mentioned dinner plans. In fact, that night, she'd come home with a bag of takeout. Said she'd worked late and didn't have time to cook. I stared at the receipt for a long time before slipping it into a folder I had started keeping in my closet. A small manila thing with a few other oddities. A parking garage stub from a hotel I didn't recognize. A matchbook from a bar across town. And now, the dinner receipt. Little things. Individually meaningless. But together, they were starting to form a picture I couldn't ignore. About 2 weeks later, I decided to test something. I told her I had to go out of town for a work conference. An overnight thing, same as her Austin trip. But there was no conference. I stayed at a cheap motel 30 minutes away. Just me, my laptop, and a 6-pack. I needed to see what she'd do when she thought I was gone. I left early Saturday morning. Gave her a kiss goodbye. I'll be back late tomorrow. She smiled. Waved me off like it was any other day. I checked into the motel and waited. Around 8 p.m. I drove back toward our neighborhood, parking a few blocks away. I walked the rest of the way, cutting through the back trail that led to our yard. The house was dark at first, then lights flicked on, kitchen, then living room. A little while later, the sound of a car engine. A second set of headlights in the driveway. I stayed hidden, just beyond the tree line. Through the window, I saw her. Martha. In leggings and an oversized tee, his tee, I realized. It wasn't mine. She was barefoot, laughing again, handing a drink to someone I couldn't fully see. Tall, broad shoulders. He stepped out of view before I could get a better look. I stayed until midnight. The lights dimmed. The TV glow flickered upstairs. I didn't need to see more. I walked back to the car, my jaw clenched, my palms sweaty. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't do anything except sit in the front seat for 20 minutes, staring at the wheel, heart rattling like a freight train. I hadn't imagined it. I wasn't crazy. I had seen him. I had seen her. I drove back to the motel and didn't sleep a second that night. Over the next few days, I withdrew. Subtly. Carefully. I didn't want her to know what I knew. Not yet. I still didn't have enough. I needed faces, timestamps, context. I needed something undeniable. But my behavior changed. I know it did. I wasn't the same. She noticed. You've been quiet lately, she said one morning, making coffee. Just work stress. I lied. She came around the counter, touched my arm. You sure everything's okay? I looked into her eyes, those same eyes I used to know so well, and nodded. Yeah. She kissed me. Light, safe, controlled. I felt nothing. Later that week, I installed a small motion-activated camera near the garage. Discreet. Tucked behind a potted plant. It wasn't high-tech. Just enough to catch faces. Enough to verify patterns. Enough to know for sure. I told myself it was necessary. That I deserved the truth. That I had earned it. And deep down, I already knew what it would show. The first night I checked the footage, nothing happened. The driveway stayed empty. The porch light flicked on and off with the timer. Martha came home alone, groceries in hand, and disappeared inside without so much as a phone call on the porch. I watched the entire clip on my laptop, heart pounding with anticipation, but it ended in silence. For a brief second I felt foolish. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the guy I saw that Saturday night was a one-time thing. Maybe she had been telling the truth all along, in some twisted, partial way. But then came Thursday. Started like any other night. She left around 6:30. Said she was meeting with a client for drinks. Nothing fancy. Just a strategy session. She said. Don't wait up, she added with a smile. I might be late. I told her to take her time. She kissed me before she left, the kind of kiss meant to appear effortless. But now I recognized it for what it was, camouflage. Around 11 p.m. I sat in bed, opened my laptop and pulled up the feed. There it was. At 10:47, her car turned slowly into the driveway. Headlights swept across the garage. And then, another door opened. Passenger side. A man stepped out. I paused the video and stared at the frame. It wasn't high resolution and he moved quickly, but I could make out enough. Tall, dark hair, broad chest, casual but expensive clothes. He laughed as he shut the door, walking around to Martha's side. She stepped out too, smiling. Not the smile she gave me at dinner or when she got home from yoga. This one was different, private, confident. She touched his arm. He touched her waist. And they stood there in the driveway like they had done it 100 times. No hesitation, no fear, just routine. I pressed play and watched them walk toward the house together. She fumbled with her keys, laughing again, and he leaned in. Close enough that I couldn't see his face anymore, just the shape of it against hers. They kissed. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't sloppy. It was familiar, like they'd done it before, like they knew exactly how to navigate each other's faces in the dark. I closed the laptop. I sat in silence for maybe an hour, not moving, barely breathing. The world felt suddenly undeniably divided before this moment and after. There it was. Proof. Not a feeling. Not a suspicion. Not some misread signal or lipstick smear I could rationalize away. This was real. Unfiltered. Time-stamped. Digital betrayal. And all I felt was numb. I didn't say anything the next day. I went through my routine like always. Showered. Ate cereal. Kissed her cheek. Have a good one, I said. You too, she replied, smiling like we weren't living in two different realities. I spent the rest of the day going over the footage again. I watched it frame by frame, screen-grabbing the clearest images. His hand on her hip, her lips on his neck. The way they moved in sync, like this wasn't new. Like they had rehearsed this dance again and again. I copied the clips to a flash drive. Backed them up to a cloud folder. Stored them on my external hard drive under a fake folder name, Tax Documents 2020. It was no longer about catching her. It was about protecting myself. That weekend, she left again. Another client meeting that required heels and red lipstick and perfume I hadn't smelled on her in months. I waited for her to leave. Then I moved. I checked the footage again. Another visit. This time, they didn't linger in the driveway. They walked straight inside. He didn't even hesitate. Like he belonged there. Like he knew which floorboard creaked or where we kept the wine. That was what broke me. Not the kiss. Not the hand on her waist. But the way he walked into my home like it was his. I closed the screen and just sat there for a long time. The living room was still. The silence rang in my ears. A bowl sat on the coffee table, still half full of popcorn from the night before. A blanket folded neatly on the back of the couch. Our wedding photo hung above the mantel. A **T of two people who had once believed in forever. Now it was just a lie framed in wood. I started collecting things. Building the case in quiet pieces. Old receipts. Parking stubs. Text alerts on our shared phone bill that lined up with her nights working late. The lipstick smear from the party had been the first crack. But now the whole facade was collapsing. I noticed everything. The way she changed her passcode weekly. The new lingerie tucked into the back of her drawer. Tags gone, not worn for me. A voice message she accidentally left running after a call. Her laughter echoing faintly as a man's voice said, "You always smell so damn good." She had deleted it later, but not before I saved it. All of it went into the folder. I called it closure. The worst part? She still acted normal. Still asked me how my day was. Still sent me texts with heart emojis. Still sat beside me on the couch with her legs tucked under mine as we watched reruns of old sitcoms. She still said, "I love you." She said it easily, casually, the way you say it when you mean it, or when you've said it so many times that the words have lost all their edges. I stopped saying it back. I don't think she noticed. One night, I came home to find her humming in the kitchen, cooking pasta. Red wine was open, music playing low. She looked radiant, like the version of herself I remembered from early on. Playful, warm. It hit me, suddenly, how well she could pretend. "How was your day?" she asked, turning to kiss my cheek. "Busy," I replied. "Yours?" "Oh, the usual," she said, stirring the sauce. "Emails, calls, a presentation review." She lied so smoothly, it didn't even crack her voice. I wondered if I'd ever lied that well, if I even could. We sat down for dinner, ate, laughed, talked about nothing. Then, while she washed dishes, I slipped upstairs and opened the folder one last time. There was the video from the garage, paused on the frame of him brushing her hair behind her ear. It should have made me angry, but all I felt was exhausted. That night, I lay beside her in bed while she slept, her back turned to me, hair fanned out across the pillow. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the slow rhythm of her breathing. I thought about everything we had built, the vacations, the quiet mornings, the inside jokes, the dreams for children, for a future. Then I thought about her laugh in the driveway, her perfume, his hand. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. It was quiet, smooth, clinical, like a thread slowly being pulled from a sweater, unnoticed until it all unraveled. And now I knew the truth, not from a gut feeling, not from a guess, but from the frame-by-frame footage of a life I wasn't part of. There was no more wondering, no more denial. I had my proof, and soon she'd have to face it too. After the footage, something in me shifted. The doubt was gone, replaced by a strange stillness. Like when a storm finally breaks and all that's left is wet earth and the smell of ruin. The weight of suspicion had been heavy, but certainty was heavier. And yet I didn't confront her. Not because I was afraid, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted the full picture. I needed to understand just how far it had gone, how deep the lie ran. So instead of screaming or throwing accusations, I went quiet. Utterly, unervingly quiet. That was the beginning of the cold silence. The first thing I did was buy a binder. A plain, black 3-ring binder from the office supply store downtown. I picked up tab dividers, plastic sleeves, and a pack of sticky notes. Felt absurd, almost laughably formal. Like I was prepping for a school project instead of curating the evidence of a broken marriage. But I needed something tangible. Something to hold in my hands when the gaslighting started. Because I knew it would. I labeled the first tab, receipts, the dinner stubs, the hotel minibar charges, a spa transaction from a place across town that she'd never once mentioned visiting. Then came photos. I printed stills from the garage footage, one for every night he came over. I made sure to include timestamps. You could see them smiling, touching, leaning close like they didn't have a single care in the world. Next tab, texts and logs. I didn't have access to her phone, but I had our phone bill. The same unknown number appeared over and over, often after midnight, or just before she got home from work dinners. I highlighted each one, drew lines between dates and behaviors. I had notes like, claimed to be at the gym, or came home smelling like cologne, again. Every lie had a corresponding timestamp now. Every evasion was backed by evidence. I wasn't making it up, and that gave me power. I started sleeping with my back to her. First, she didn't seem to notice. We'd kiss goodnight, exchange brief love yous, and roll to our sides. But over time, I stopped responding. I let her voice float over me like background noise. I couldn't fake it anymore. Once, she touched my arm and said, "You okay, babe?" "Just tired," I said. That became my line, my shield. just tired. But the truth was, I was fully awake. More awake than I had been in years. She went out more often now. And I let her. Every time she slipped on a new dress or dabbed perfume behind her ears, she'd say something like, "Don't wait up," or, "It's just work stuff." And I'd smile, nod, wish her luck. Then I'd open the laptop and hit record. The man never parked in front of the house. He always walked up from down the block. Like they'd worked out the routine in advance. Smart, cautious, but not smart enough. The camera caught him every time. Always the same jacket, the same slight limp in his right leg, the same smug familiarity with the front porch light. Sometimes they'd stay inside for hours. Other times he'd leave quickly right after she did, like they were coordinating elsewhere. I started tracking those moments too. I began cross-referencing restaurant menus with the timestamps, figuring out where they went based on receipts left in her purse or bank statements that showed up in our account. I was becoming someone else. Not bitter, not even angry, just methodical, cold. The silence in our house became a third presence. Bigger than me, bigger than her. It stretched through the hallways, curled up at our feet during breakfast, hovered above us while we watched TV in the evenings. We no longer shared stories. She didn't ask about my day, and I stopped pretending to care about hers. Even when we did speak, it was empty. "Did you get more coffee?" "Yeah, it's on the counter." Or, "I'm heading out." Okay, that was the extent of it. The int asterisk Macy between us had become a routine performance, stripped of heart. And yet, she didn't seem concerned. Maybe she thought I was distracted. Maybe she was so wrapped up in her secret life that she assumed mine had become dull and distant on its own. She never once asked if I was unhappy. Not really. Maybe because she already knew the answer, and was hoping I wouldn't say it out loud. At night, I'd lie awake cataloging the red flags I had missed. The new perfume she randomly picked up. The way she had started shaving her legs on weeknights again, after months of not bothering. The makeup wipes that disappeared faster than usual. The hotel keycard I found in her coat pocket and pretended not to see. None of it felt like a coincidence anymore. The more I saw, the more it became clear. This wasn't some slip-up. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was an alternate life. One that didn't include me. One afternoon, she came home from yoga class with a fresh manicure. Pale pink, glossy. "Mood boost," she said, holding up her hands. I nodded, not bothering to ask who really saw them first. She leaned against the counter, sipping water from a metal bottle, her cheeks still flushed from whatever workout she claimed to have done. Then she said, "You've been quiet lately." I met her eyes. "Yeah," I said. "Guess I have." She waited for me to elaborate, but I didn't, and for a second her smile faltered. Just for a second. Then she pushed off the counter, humming as she walked down the hallway, like nothing had changed. But everything had. I kept the binder hidden in the back of my office closet, beneath an old shoebox of tax files. I checked it nightly, sometimes adding a page, sometimes just flipping through it to remind myself that I wasn't imagining things, that I wasn't the crazy one. Eventually, I made a second copy. Digital. Encrypted. I created a Google Drive folder, private, labeled vacation plans. Inside were images, logs, *TS, video stills. I shared the folder with a single email address, my own backup, just in case something ever accidentally happened to my laptop. I didn't know what I would do with the evidence yet, but I knew I wasn't ready to confront her until it was all airtight. Because when I really left, I wanted the truth to speak louder than any excuse she could offer. One night, she came home late, wine on her breath, cheeks glowing. She kicked off her shoes and dropped onto the couch beside me. "Miss me?" she teased. I turned, met her eyes, and said nothing. She blinked, then laughed awkwardly. "God, you're no fun lately." "I've just had a lot on my mind," I said flatly. She rolled her eyes and pulled a blanket over herself, scrolling through her phone like I didn't exist. That was the last night we sat together. The next evening, I started sleeping in the guest room. I told her I had a cold and didn't want to risk passing it on. She didn't protest, didn't question it. She just said, okay, and went back to texting someone I'd never met. Eventually, the house no longer felt like a home. It was a museum of routines. Ghosts of us lingered in every corner. The photos on the wall, the chipped mugs in the cabinet, the hoodie she still stole from me on chilly mornings. All just artifacts now. She didn't see the cracks. Or she refused to. Maybe she thought I was too passive to leave. Too boring. Too dependent. Maybe she thought she could have it both ways forever. And maybe, for a time, she was right. But she wouldn't be for much longer. I woke up early that Sunday morning. Not from an alarm, just instinct. My eyes opened to the soft gray light bleeding through the guest room curtains. The kind of morning that felt too still, too quiet, like the world hadn't quite started spinning yet. It was time. There was no fight, no screaming, no final betrayal that pushed me over the edge. I didn't need one. The silence between us had said everything that words never could. I had seen enough, heard enough, felt enough, and now I was done waiting for her to notice. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat there for a while, hands clasped, listening for any sign of movement from the master bedroom. Nothing. I stood, walked to the closet, and opened the duffel I had packed 3 days earlier. It was small, barely enough for a long weekend. A few changes of clothes, a pair of running shoes, my laptop, and one old, dog-eared book. The first one she ever gave me. Back when things were still new and full of potential. I don't know why I packed it. Maybe as a reminder. Maybe as a way to say goodbye to the version of her I once believed in. The folder came next. The binder was too bulky, so I had condensed the contents onto a flash drive, well-organized, labeled, encrypted. I slipped it into the laptop sleeve, along with a printed photo. Just one. It was the clearest still from the camera footage. The two of them standing close in the driveway, her hand on his chest, his mouth at her ear. They looked happy, like lovers, like strangers to me. Across the top of the photo, I had written 4 words in black marker. I know. Goodbye, LM. That's all. No anger. No please. Just truth. I placed the photo in the center of the kitchen table. No note. No explanation. Just the picture, framed by morning light and silence. I stood there for a moment, staring at it. This table had hosted 100 dinners. Birthday candles. Morning coffee. Laughter. Arguments. Planning lists. Grocery scribbles. Talk of children we never had. Now it was just a stage for the final act. I looked around the room, at the fridge magnets from places we'd never go again, the slightly crooked wedding photo on the wall, the chipped mug that said, "Best husband ever," which had become some kind of cruel joke. I felt nothing. Not numb. Not angry. Just finished. I moved through the house like a ghost one last time. I left my keys on the hook, my toothbrush in the bathroom, my wedding ring in the drawer where she'd never look until much later. I didn't leave her a list of reasons. She already knew them all. Whether she'd admit them to herself or not, that wasn't my responsibility anymore. When I opened the front door, the early air hit me like a reset button. Crisp. Quiet. The street was still asleep. Lawns damp with dew. A couple of Sunday newspapers tossed lazily on driveways. I stepped out and didn't look back. Not once. I didn't have a grand plan. Just an address. An apartment on the other side of the city that I'd signed the lease for 2 days earlier. It wasn't much. 1 bedroom, no view, a little too close to the train tracks. But it was mine. Untouched. Clean. Honest. It felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. The place came furnished, mostly. A worn couch, a basic kitchen set, a bed that squeaked if you shifted too quickly. I dropped the bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and just stood in the middle of it all. Quiet. Real. Free. She called later that morning. Of course she did. I watched the phone buzz on the counter. First once. Then again. Then again. Different tones. Calls. Texts. Voicemails. I didn't answer. I didn't open the messages. I just turned the phone over, screen down the way she always used to. Let her wonder. Let her sit in the silence I had sat in for months. By noon, her tone shifted. The text started with confusion, then disbelief, then panic. Where are you? Did something happen? Mark, please call me. Then came the guilt. If this is about work stuff, I swear, nothing's going on. You've been so distant lately. I just figured you were pulling away. Is this really how you want to handle this? Eventually, I stopped reading them altogether. The silence that used to be torture had become my armor. I spent that first night in the apartment sitting on the floor with a sandwich and a beer, staring at the ceiling fan spin lazily overhead. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't call anyone to vent. I just existed, unobserved, unlied to, unbound, and it felt clean. The next morning, I went for a long walk. No destination, just movement. I passed parks and cafes, watched kids wobble past on scooters, listened to the hum of life around me. For once, I didn't feel like I was acting, smiling for the sake of keeping peace, nodding through a conversation that wasn't real. I was present. Even in the grief, I felt grounded. Even in the solitude, I felt whole. Over the next few days, her messages multiplied. Some angry, some desperate, some manipulative. She told her parents I'd had some sort of breakdown, that I'd quit my job and left without warning. She told friends I was going through a phase, that I'd probably be back soon, that this was a weird thing I did sometimes. I didn't reply. I didn't need to justify my escape to the person who had built the cage. I forwarded her parents the folder. Every still image, every log, every time-stamped receipt. I sent it quietly, professionally. No commentary, just the truth. Their reply was silence. I figured they knew, or maybe they didn't want to know. Either way, they stopped asking questions. I started sleeping better. Not right away, but gradually. I stopped flinching at 2 a.m., expecting to hear the front door creak. I stopped checking the time whenever my phone buzzed, wondering if it was her, spinning some new excuse. Instead, I read, cooked, I ran. I remembered who I was before all of this. Before my life had become about tracking, doubting, decoding. Before the version of love I had clung to turned out to be a mask for someone else's affair.